When I messaged one of my mates telling him that I was covering a 007 game on the original Game Boy, he responded by asking if it was a platformer or a shooter. I guess we've been so conditioned by Bond games being shooters and by licensed games being unambitious, and we expect Game Boy games to be quite simple, so that you wouldn't expect a Bond game on the original Game Boy with this simple title and cover art to be a full-blown Zelda-style top-down adventure RPG with a completely original story, especially not one that released so late in the Game Boy's life cycle in 1998. So naturally, being the fiend for unusual licensed games that I am, I was curious to check this out and I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but quickly I realized that this game is something quite special. The first level is set in China, and immediately you get a feel for the familiar mechanics. NPCs stand around waiting for you to talk to them, and you collect items and weapons over the course of the game, which you Link's Awakening style assign to your A and B buttons to use. It's simple, practical, old-school gameplay that serves to not get in the way of what shines with the humor, world building, pace, and level design. Making your way through China, you'll talk to the locals who inform you about their supposedly beautiful and powerful master named Zhong Mei. They'll also tell you about how military guys keep turning up to the temple, but they don't know where they go after that, and that one visitor was a large man with a deadly hat. I wonder who that could be. You find the temple and fight your way past the guard, where the priests talk about how military people keep entering, but they don't know where they go. So naturally, you find a secret door, which clues you into a secret base, where you find Zhong Mei and fight her between some cheesy Bond banter, and after defeating her you must escape the level, fighting your way through all the military bad guys. Now, in some sense, this is all very straightforward, but it's impressive in how effective it is at hooking you in and establishing itself as a game that's put together in a very considered way. This level alone has its own 3-act structure, where you have a build-up, a confrontation, and a climax with the escape, and nothing about it is contrived or just thrown together. Like, there's a justified reason for you to fight the guard before the temple, and Zhong Mei could have just been some random boss, but instead we have a lot of build-up to introduce her, and even when it turns into a fight with a bunch of goons, those goons had their own foreshadowing and justification for existing. And that care for these details is upheld throughout the game. Like, it's always clear what you're doing, where you are, who you're fighting, and why you're fighting them, which is something that big action games today can struggle with. Again, it might not sound like much, but you can feel how handcrafted it all is, and it's especially impressive on the Game Boy. This first 15 minutes also sets up that there's a mysterious large man with a deadly hat, it sets up that there's some nefarious going-ons worth investigating, and it sets up the campy early Bond writing style, which is really showing off in the next level back at the MI6 headquarters, where you hit on Moneypenny, visit M in his office, and visit Q with all his goofy gadgets that he tells you not to touch. This is essentially a black and white retro video game pixely vignette of a Bond MI6 scene, and you can describe the collection of levels that follow this in the same way as you travel around the world doing very Bond-esque things in very Bond-esque places. Marrakesh sees you adventuring through hotel pools and black markets and secret passageways where you see exotic dancers and fire breathers and unwelcoming locals. Like, it's surprising just how much atmosphere that they pull off here with so few pixels, and at one point you go to a casino where you must gamble your way up to the high rollers table with actual gambling mini-games. This is a Bond game that's more than just shooting away your problems, which is very novel even if it did come out earlier than most Bond shooting games, and it's funny that this of all Bond games is the one to be this way. When you do finally encounter Oddjob, also known as the Deadly Hat Guy, they establish him as a threatening villain by having an unwinnable boss battle where, when you lose, he throws you out into the middle of the Sahara Desert and you have to keep refilling a water bottle to survive while making your way to an escape using a GPS tracker. It's kind of amazing to me that this game has some basic survival mechanics that, again, make it a much more unusual and thoughtfully designed experience than you'd expect. The first thing that I did after beating this game was write down a list of all my favorite moments, like the Marrakesh Casino or the Sahara Desert. I was just so swept up by all the surprisingly interesting design ideas and the charming jokes and the references and the typical Bond stuff being translated down to an 8-bit Game Boy that I was excited to put this review together simply to rave about it all. Like, at one point someone tells you a war leader that's being hyped up as a boss battle is actually frightened very easily, then once you reach him you shoot him once and he puts up a surrender flag and tells you what you need to know. At another point, there's a boss battle with Jaws, who you of course defeat by luring him into giant magnets. There's a litter of cutesy gags and references like this throughout that help alleviate what can be some of the more admittedly dated and annoying design. There's a fair bit of checking every single wall and object that you see for items, and there's too many areas that are intentionally maze-like, and sometimes it can just be too easy to miss stuff. Like, I needed a shield to beat Oddjob, but I had no idea that I needed a shield, so I just banged my head against his boss battle for far longer than I should have. Or another time I had to blow up a rock wall, but I didn't notice that the rock wall that I needed to blow up looked slightly different to the other rock wall, so I ran around the level confused for far too long. Most of the time the logic is very well telegraphed and it's generally fun figuring out what you need to do, but it's the occasions where you unknowingly do things in the wrong order, or you miss a single subtle hint, or you get lost in a maze that will make you want to play the game with a walkthrough by your side. You might also find it hard to stomach the fairly antiquated combat, which is functional trading hit stuff. Some basic resource management with the ammo, weapon types, health packs, and body armor makes it a bit more involved than it may look, and this might be unintentional by the developers, but the fact that Bond moves horizontally slightly quicker than he does vertically makes you think about your positioning and how you approach enemies a little bit more than you otherwise would. But at the end of the day, this is a very basic combat system that merely serves its purpose, and is generally only as fun as its context or the level surrounding it. Like, when you're escaping in China, it's exciting, but when you're completely lost in a maze of tunnels, it's irritating, especially because the save system just isn't that good. The final two levels in particular are the worst in this regard. There's a lot of aimlessly running around the same looking areas, flipping random switches, hoping that it's doing anything, and I genuinely think that once you're near the end, you should just pull up a walkthrough, because most of the best stuff in this game is in the first 2/3 of the game anyway, which I think is this game's biggest flaw. You'll beat the game in only around 4 hours, but it feels far longer than that because of this bland final stretch. If you're going to play this, you may need to have like a taste for this old design, or even just some tolerance or patience for it, so that you can experience all the more interesting and goofy parts. Like, for example, the part in Marrakesh where you stumble upon a brothel, and because this is the sleazy womanizing old school Bond, of course all the girls adore him, and it's very obviously implied that Bond sleeps with one of them for a diamond. Between this and the gambling and the violence, this is a surprisingly adult game for the Game Boy. There's one level where Bond is sent to a village in Kurdistan to take out some sort of rebel military leader, so he does, and that's the level complete. Later in the game, Bond returns to Kurdistan to discover that without that leader, there's no one to protect that village, and it's surprisingly eerie walking around that same place where the buildings are bombed and burning, and there are bodies scattered around with crows picking away at them. Like I said, this is a surprisingly adult game for the original Game Boy. Bond being Bond, he doesn't acknowledge or emotionally respond in any way to any of this. In fact, he enters a nearby war zone and takes out a couple more military leaders at the directive of another military leader simply to meet his goals for MI6. Like, Bond is more than willing to continue swaggering along smugly with his pixelated hand in his pixelated pocket, continuing to destabilize a war zone because he's the cold-hearted one-track government agent that he is. And the final boss, who's in a mech suit because of course he is, rationalizes that having a powerful army is a way to enforce order in these chaotic war zones, which is dialogue that was smartly set up by Bond's experience in Kurdistan. Of course, Bond just continues on his mission, stops the missile launch, gets the girl, who happens to be Zong Mei from the start of the game, and they walk off holding hands, or they boat off together in a bonus ending that you get if you find a secret item. Between this and the cheesy one-liners and the obnoxious womanizing, this is a surprisingly rounded and well thought out portrayal of the Bond character that goes deeper into it than most other Bond games. It makes me daydream about what a huge AAA Bond game could do if it tried to be more than just action and explored this character in more complex ways. Fingers crossed for that IO Interactive game, I guess. And it gets me thinking about how many times that Bond has just been tossed into a shooting game and thrown through set-piece action scenes. It's just delightful to me that all of this depth and intrigue and all of these creative and inventive moments were pulled off on the original Game Boy of all things, with these monochromatic 8-bit graphics and this beepy soundtrack, which features a fun rendition of the main theme, where the main motif plays almost every time you beat an objective. A smaller US developer named Sapphire made this, and I love that they saw developing for the Game Boy as an opportunity rather than a limitation. Now, because of this game's more dated aspects and its slog of an ending, I do hesitate to call it one of the more enjoyable 007 games, and you might need to have a certain appreciation for retro video games to really enjoy it, but if you think that you'd enjoy this, you should absolutely check it out, because against all odds, James Bond 007 on the original Game Boy is one of the most memorable, charming, and in some ways ambitious 007 games ever made. And there we wrap up a shorter video this time. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. I just sort of wanted to sort of shine a light on this game. Like, as soon as I started playing it, there was a moment of, yeah, I feel like I need to cover this. I feel like this needs more coverage. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, you can like and subscribe and comment and click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff, which I don't really like asking for, but it helps when I do, according to my analytics. Or you can support on Patreon. And I won't be thanking my patrons by name this time around, just because this is a shorter video and I don't want this final section to take so long, but I'll list them all. So thank you to all the patrons on the screen, and thank you to all my patrons. And if you want to join the Patreon, you get ad-free videos and some other stuff, so that's worth checking out too. And yeah, I hope you've all been well, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.